On September 25th, Kodiak, a self-driving truck software company founded in 2018, went public with a $2.5 billion valuation. Now, unlike other companies that make the whole truck autonomous, they retrofit existing equipment with their sensors and software. Also, unlike other companies in their space, they have revenue, which is amazing for an autonomous vehicle company. In 2024, Kodiak became the first company to announce delivery of a driverless semi-truck to a paying customer. And as exciting as that all is, I think you probably have the same question as me. Will it work? And that actually goes for the solution as well as Kodiak's business model. And so in this episode of Art of Supply, I will take you through how the Kodiak model works and what makes it different, including how they generate revenue. We'll talk about where they already have trucks in operation and how that's going, as well as the military investment that infused them with the capital needed to grow. And finally, from an operational and investment point of view, will this model work long term? Formerly known as Kodiak Robotics, the company changed their name to Kodiak AI in the lead up to their IPO to emphasize the role of AI in their self-driving software. That said, on their website and in their marketing materials, they seem to just refer to themselves as Kodiak, so I'll do the same here. These are equipped to be fully autonomous trucks with no need for a driver or observer. But because they're just regular trucks that have been converted, they can accommodate both. And they've earned the nickname Robo Trucks. The company is based in California and focused on long-haul trucking, which is ironic in a way because the regulatory environment in California is not exactly friendly to their kind of operation. In fact, the companies Too Simple and Embark both gave up and closed their US operations because they couldn't get past the regulatory hurdles. Kodiak's trucks debuted in late 2024, early this year, and it's pretty impressive. They can operate in what the company considers normal inclement weather, meaning if other vehicles and equipment with human operators can run, so can Kodiak trucks. They're currently operating in the Permian Basin for the industrial sand mining company Atlas Energy Solutions. Atlas is currently running 8 trucks 24/7 and has placed a total order for 100 trucks. Now, the area where the Kodiak trucks operates is remote and the roads are private, but there are other vehicles out there and there are obstacles that have to be avoided. Werner Enterprises and JB Hunt, as well as some other companies, are testing their equipment on public roads, but they're using observers in those vehicles. Now, as the story goes, Kodiak CEO and founder Don Burnett lost a friend to a car accident, and that motivated him to start a career looking at autonomous vehicles as a way to increase road safety. He's former Uber. Actually, technically, he's former Google. He worked as part of the Auto project that was acquired by Uber. Kodiak was not AI-based when it started, which is another interesting little fact. Because I think these days, most of the credit and attention goes to AI native solutions. Kodiak is proving that it's not necessary to be AI native in order to have your success powered by AI technology. And their track record is really impressive. They've driven 2.8 million autonomous miles and delivered more than 7,300 loads. Now, Atlas went in cautiously, and they ran over 750 hours of fully driverless operations with Kodiak before committing to their large purchase. Now, when I think about the capabilities of autonomous vehicles, whether it happens to be a Class 8 or something transporting you to the airport, I always wonder, what if something goes wrong? Now, in this case, Kodiak-powered trucks can ask for help, and teams can intervene remotely. They can also put a human in the loop at key points, and trucks are fully able to operate offline if needed because the software is embedded in each truck rather than requiring something like constant internet connectivity in order to work. This remote access can allow the truck to interact with first responders through microphones and cameras. Now, to date, Kodiak has not recorded any accidents where they are at fault with its driverless trucks. So there's a little bit of a caveat in there. The company has acknowledged instances where their trailers have been struck by other vehicles. And in those cases, we don't know if they were parked in a bad place, if they stopped suddenly. But as far as their records go, they have not caused any accidents. Now, in the case of an accident, these trucks are designed to detect the collision and safely pull over. Some of the other moments where humans may have to be in the loop and that any customer of a Kodiak truck is going to have to think through are those funny pickup and drop off moments. So it's one thing to have the truck driving by itself when a driver would be alone to get from point A to point B, but it could be really weird if you have a truck pull up at the destination and people at the receiving dock don't know quite what to do because nobody gets out of the cab. Now, that's how the trucks operate, but their business model is interesting as well. So, how do they charge for this capability? They call it Kodiak Driver, and it's the company's driver as a service model. Fleets have the option of paying a per mile or per vehicle license fee to access both the technology that goes on the trucks as well as that remote support. The per mile licensing fee is about 97 cents a mile, or they can pay that monthly license fee of about $341,000. Now, from that, the company subtracts estimated customer savings. We love savings of anywhere between 15 and 35%. And I'm assuming that's based on the number of trucks that they're running. The company has a relatively modest quarterly burn rate of about $20 million, which doesn't sound small, but compared to their competition, it's actually pretty healthy. Kodiak Driver was created and tested on Class 8s, but it's not limited to any specific truck, meaning you can put it in a Freightliner, a Peterbilt, a Kenworth, International, etc. They are all the same to the Kodiak system. The other interesting distinction is that Kodiak Driver does not use HD maps like something like Waymo uses. They use what are called sparse maps. So there's less information on the maps themselves, and instead the trucks rely more on sensors and perception than localization. So if you use, let's say, Waze, for instance, to go someplace you've never driven before, you are highly reliant on Waze to tell you where to turn, when to stop, if you've passed it and you need to go back, like I do all the time. And it's the human being in the car that's stopping for red lights, that's not hitting other drivers, that's watching for pedestrians. In this case, there's a little bit less detail in the map and the directional logic, and there's more of an emphasis placed on those sensors that tell the truck what's going on around it. Now, Roush Industries is actually a company that Kodiak has partnered with to do this upfitting, and they put sensor pods on each truck. Some of the pictures and videos that I looked at basically look like they get attached near the side rear view mirrors. The company plans to have hundreds of trucks operating next year and thousands by the end of 2027. In one of the promotional videos they've shared, you can actually see an example of a driver getting the truck onto the road remotely, and then the driverless systems take over from there. So it almost looks like an e-racing game where you're playing and you have your pretend driving wheel, and then you've got 3 monitors that sort of approximate the view that you would have out the windshield of a truck. So that driver is able to see, literally through cameras, navigate that truck, let's say up onto a highway, and then flip the switch and the driverless system takes over from there. Now, long haul runs are particularly hard to staff. We hear a lot of debate about the availability of drivers, but it also opens the opportunity to savings. The fact that Atlas is operating 24/7 means that there's an opportunity to save even more than would be at stake with traditional 9 to 5 over-the-road trucking. Making all of this possible, and it's interesting because it actually connects back to the idea of sparse maps versus HD ones, is the fact that much of their early funding came from military contracts. They have projects underway with the Department of Defense or Department of War, if we want to stay up to date. Kodiak received a $30 million Army contract to adapt its technology for military trucks. There was also a $50 million contract that they signed with the U.S. Air Force in 2022. In these cases, they're looking to basically make vehicles able to go into very high-risk, dangerous missions without people on board. And one of the examples included integrating Kodiak Driver into a Textron prototype military vehicle. So even in a military use case, they're still not building the vehicles. They're designing software that's flexible enough to go on a vehicle that someone else has made. It doesn't seem like the military is going to be their primary focus going forward, but it did accomplish a couple of things. The big one, of course, is money. It gave them much needed capital during a time when funding was harder to access and they were trying to grow. But it also gave them the perfect opportunity to test their self-driving tech stack in unstructured off-road environments, exactly what they are doing for Atlas today. As CEO Don Burnett explained, the 21-mile stretch of land where Kodiak drives doesn't have any paved roads or structure. It's not turn left at the stop sign. You can't even turn right at the Dunkin' Donuts like we do here in Boston. The way he explains it, there are only, quote, cactuses and bushes out there, which are not great for navigation. Driving off-road, whether it's for a military application or something like Atlas needs, is actually a much more challenging problem set for AV companies to solve. You can't rely on maps because there aren't any roads. And these off-road environments may also change more suddenly as weather conditions shift. So in the end, those sparse maps are actually less of a corner cut in terms of development and more of a sophisticated advantage associated with the technology. Now, there's not necessarily a consensus about whether there is actually a driver shortage. This is something that I've covered in a few of the past Art of Supply episodes. But we know at the very least there's high turnover, and companies with high standards sometimes have difficulty filling all of these seats. Self-driving trucks could definitely help fill that gap. And that gap is expected to widen as drivers continue to retire and Gen Z is not exactly rushing to fill their seats. These trucks can operate 24/7, really only pausing for fuel and maintenance. And I imagine they'll be able to compete for operating time with electric and other alternate forms of powered vehicles. This greatly increases asset utilization because human-driven trucks are also limited by hours of service safety regulations. If these vehicles potentially find their way onto the road, it could even lower the cost of shipping, something that everyone's interested in. Kodiak is hoping that they can make the case that with AI, they will be able to increase fuel efficiency by factoring that into speed decisions and even reducing the wear and tear on vehicles. And both of these ideas are included in their customer value proposition. And then, of course, there's always safety. These trucks won't get distracted. They won't get sleepy. They're never tempted to have a beer with dinner. And Kodiak has trained their vehicles how to handle being hit. However, none of this makes the idea a slam dunk. As I've mentioned, regulation is definitely an issue. And the fact of the matter is, it's being handled at the state level, which means it's not just one set of regulations in the United States that needs to be abided by. Texas welcomes autonomous trucks. No special permit is required if the vehicles meet basic safety standards. But as I've said, California has even talked about passing legislation that would require a human driver in any heavy truck Kodiak and their peers put on the road. So all of these companies are going to have to navigate these state-by-state differences, how it affects the cost benefits, how it affects their rollout timing as they expand their routes. And because of that, it makes it a little bit more difficult to convince shippers and carriers that this driverless tech is not only safe, but worth the investment. The reality is these systems are expensive. There's a reason that a couple of the first groups to put in cash were military organizations. It actually takes a really long time for labor savings or even equipment efficiency savings to offset the upfront investment. And of course, in some cases, companies are still putting at least observers in the trucks, so they're not even saving the whole labor cost. Kodiak is definitely not the only game in town, but they do seem to be ahead of the competition. Aurora Innovation is doing well, and they're already on the highway for FedEx in Texas, back to that regulatory point. Embark Trucks wound down their operations and liquidated all of their assets in 2023 after failing to drive sufficient revenue. Too Simple faced scrutiny over ties to China, as well as a high-profile crash. By late 2023, they had laid off most of their US workforce and shifted their focus back to Asia. Also in 2023, interesting that's such a turning point for the industry, Alphabet's Waymo decided to, quote, shift most of its capital to robo-taxi development and pause its self-driving truck program indefinitely. Now, they could pick that back up at any time, but right now, it seems like Kodiak has the road to itself. So this brings us back to the question of whether it will work. Well, with the IPO, they're now flush with cash, and they have plans to put their newly acquired capital into manufacturing capacity and R&D. And I think they're going to need to do that. There's a lot of visibility associated with how these trucks operate, and that's good and bad. It's good because people will become aware that this is possible, but it's going to be bad if anything goes wrong. Analyst Michael McGrath, who focuses on the autonomous vehicle space, isn't sold on the investment opportunity, at least not yet. As he wrote, he finds their ramp up plan overly optimistic, saying, quote, overall, I believe that Kodiak is too risky an investment at this time. Its autonomous technology may work very well, but it will most likely require more capital before it can sustain a break-even operation. Now, it's a fair point. Because Kodiak was private before the IPO, not a whole lot is known about its financial state. And multiple sources that I found recommend waiting at least one round of quarterly financial statements are available before anyone invests heavily. Now, that's people looking to make money on Kodiak. But what about the companies that need transportation and can't find enough qualified drivers? Will they invest in buying Kodiak driver systems? For that, we will just have to wait and see. But it may not be that long, depending on what state that you're in, before you see a truck go down the road that has nobody behind the wheel and Kodiak on the side.